Hello and welcome to another episode of Prodigy Search Presents. I'm Mark Resch Jr., partner at Prodigy Search. Today we're going to talk about interviews and obviously as a follow-up to the discussions on resumes and cover letters, this in theory is the next step. And one of the things that we'll talk about perhaps in two different parts is standard traditional interviews and then move on to virtual and video interviews. Although elements of the latter will certainly seep into the conversation today. But to keep it brief and short and simple, let's focus on your standard issue interviews, both phone and in person. And again, we'll kind of weave in a few comments on each of those. But let's start with the phases, right? What to do before the interview, what to do during the interview, and then clearly what to do after the interview. Going into the interview, and frankly, beforehand, there's so much that goes into this, but it's probably underutilized and not enough effort put into. So let's look at the basics. Practice interviewing at home, looking at mirrors, recording yourself on your computer, just answering your questions aloud so that you can hear yourself explain something. Perhaps just Googling common interview questions just to get you in the right frame of mind, looking at your resume, having those examples ready to go. And I think what's also critical is prepare for, I guess, even the most simple questions that are asked. But if you think you've been asked a lot of these more difficult questions that you have a challenge answering, write them down, write them out. Think about your answers to the ones that usually have difficulty verbalizing, and then repeat those just to get you in the right mindset. You don't want to sound robotic when it comes time to interview, but you do want to sound prepared. So practice interviewing at home, right? Work on those sample questions. The other one that I would say, again, also underutilized is doing your research, doing your homework on the company and on the people you're meeting with, researching on their website, looking at their values, their news, their mission, looking up the people you're meeting with in terms of their background, their stories, how they got there, what their role is, et cetera. But doing your research and your homework ahead of time. That, again, it'll be abundantly clear if you have not. And I've lost candidates for different searches, executive searches that we've worked on based on a lack of preparation. And you think at that stage of your career, 10, 20, 30 years of experience, it's built in, it's part, doing your research and your homework ahead of time is built in. Not always the case, but again, treat a job interview just like you would a sales pitch, to where you have to do a lot of that background work before you even go in there and show your deck and walk through your slides. Here's I think one of the things that, even though in 2020, 2021, things have changed and evolved, not just because of video, but just because of the nature of the business world, dress the part, regardless of whether it's Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or in person. Always better to be overdressed, always better to be dressed formally than underdressed. I would say it's important for, in my opinion, men to wear suit and tie, clean shaven, trim your beard, watch out for things that are distracting. Women, same thing, dress formally, be cautious of too much or potentially distracting jewelry, things of that nature. But I would say here's the asterisk. Look at if the company provides direct and very specific direction on what to wear or what not to wear to the job interview, follow that. That's the one asterisk on this, right? If they say business casual, don't show up in a suit because you're misreading the room, you're tone deaf to the situation. So I would say follow the direction. But obviously, even if it's at a company that traditionally wears jeans and t-shirt and they don't give you direction, show up formally dressed. And if they tell you, hey, loosen the tie or something to that, take your jacket off, feel more comfortable, then do so. But it's hard to go the other way. So I would say treat it in terms of more of a formal environment. Some of the basics about during the interview: be on time, if not early, right? I believe the old, maybe it was a Tom Coughlin thing. Being, on time is late, 5 minutes early is on time, and being late is unacceptable. Maybe it was him or another NFL coach, but nonetheless, same thing for a job interview. Just like practice, if you're running late, if there's something happens, get a hold of the company, call them, call the recruiter you're working with, let them know as soon as possible if there is an emergency that something has come up. But punctuality does say a lot about who you are and how you will perform as a candidate as well. I would say once you get there, once you arrive, acknowledge the people you're meeting with at the front desk, security, other personnel. Don't be fake, but be genuine. Show them appreciation. Say hello. Be courteous to them, obviously. But once you get there, we can't move away from the standard issue interview tactics that have been going on since the beginning of time. And I hate when people downplay these because there still is a lot of importance on those. eye contact and handshake. Those are still important things. I know we're getting hires done right now in a virtual setting, but still important to look at those social cues, how you're engaging people in a conversation, both nonverbal and verbal are still critical even in today's day and age. Okay. Um, Again, as with during the interview, the preparation you did beforehand is going to show, right? So the questioning and being prepared for what might be thrown your way is critical. But also having questions ready for the end, right? So during the interview, you'll wrap up whatever it is, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. If it's an all day affair, you're still going to get the opportunity every single time to ask questions of the interviewers. And there's never, ever, ever a situation where you should not have questions prepared. I don't care if it's one question, three, five, or 10 questions, always have questions prepared. Once it was doing a search years ago where the candidate went through multiple rounds of phone interviews, they flew to the location, they went through kind of the car wash, right? It was an 8-hour day where they went through interviews with nearly everybody on the entire staff, which again shows you for an executive level position, you're pretty close to being hired, right? This is the stage, right, where what's coming next is probably reference checks, an offer, things of that nature are coming down the road there. And that candidate, at the end of, frankly, the last few interviews of the day, if not a majority of them, but including the president of the team that was hiring them, said, "I have no questions." They had no questions to ask the president of that team, and the president of that team actually gave the candidate another shot and said, "Listen, just to make sure you don't have anything to ask me, not one question." And the candidate said no. And still to this day, and that was about a decade ago, still to this day, I believe that was the reason that candidate did not get the job. So always have questions prepared to ask, whether it be the HR, the hiring manager, or the senior most executive you're interviewing with. Um, One of the things that I think people have a tough time doing during an interview, by the way, when it comes to questions being asked, is truly selling themselves, right? They feel like they're being cocky or boastful. This is not a time to be humble, right? And I'm not saying you can't say, as part of a team, I did this, or to use pronouns like we did this. Our organization had success here. It doesn't need to be, again, an hour-long conversation of using I or me, or hopefully not speaking the third person, but it shouldn't always be about that. But this isn't the opportunity to say, well, we could have done better, or, we only got this percent, or we only sold this number. No, this is a time to really showcase the deal. And this is and close the deal, right? Showcase your skills, showcase your experiences, and close the deal, right? And I pretty much go down this path every single time. Every job seeker should be using PARs, right? And that's a good sports analogy because of golf, but a problem, an action, and a result to nearly every question. Not every single question, but nearly every single question. When people ask you about, tell me about a time, when they're doing those traditional behavioral interview questions, there should be PARs, problems, actions, and results every single time that you get asked one of those behavioral questions. But always have stories to tell, anecdotes, right? I mean, when people bring you into an interview, the resume has done its job, the cover letter has done its job. Now they want to hear about you, they want to hear examples, stories, and they want to learn more beyond the surface. Um, I would say post-interview, a few key things to keep an eye on. Um, Obviously, walking out, shaking hands, thanking people, leaving something behind if that's necessary, whether that be resume or some sort of version of your work. Any documents that they feel necessary that they ask you to bring in terms of a project or an assignment or presentation. But close strong, right? Um, Close strong with a thank you letter, thank you email. You can do both. But really treat that kind of follow up as a good win, right? Give 3 to 5 business days and then follow up if you haven't heard from them again. But you can't just leave the interview and be done with it, right? There needs to be a next step. And by the way, when you do send that final letter or that email or both, that is also a chance to do an additional close, right? To close the deal, to follow up with additional questions that weren't answered or asked, but also include things like attachments and things of that nature, whether that be examples of your work or references. So again, just a brief overview of what to do pre-interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And we're going to follow up with another segment on virtual and video interviews.